listening to Range Minded from Independence Indoor Shooting. If you like what you hear, make sure you subscribe to us from wherever you get your podcast from, and make sure you follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Range Minded Podcast. It really does help us out. This is episode 131, where we talk about insecurities and worries about carrying, objections to carrying, and excuses and good reasons not to carry. Then we take all of those and figure out how you can mitigate those worries, insecurities, and go over some times that really you should not be carrying. Thanks for listening, and as always, we hope you enjoy episode 131 of Range Minded, The Excuses Not to Carry. Hello and welcome to Range Minded from Independence Indoor Shooting. My name is Mark Long, and I am joined as always by...
Hey, it's Steve Zimmerman, all the way on the Eastern Front.
Yeah, and it's just the two of us today. Nick Hoffer is MIA at the moment.
Yeah, he had... I hope he had things, so I hope everything's okay. We just, I guess, missed the memo or something. It's all good.
No worries. Good. Yeah, he's still around, still a member of the podcast officially, but... He's a busy guy, you know. He works Hoftech Industries is a busy operation, so
he is very busy, and that guy never stops, anyways.
Sure doesn't. So
he's always doing something.
But you're also a busy guy this weekend. You've been busy training.
It was a good weekend, yeah. So I picked up jiu-jitsu. Me and my son Brigham, that we heard on the podcast before.
Yeah,
we decided it was time. So I talked to Adam Boyce, who's a good friend of the podcast.
Sure is.
And I asked him about where he rolls around on the mats, and I'm just going to do a shameless plug. So Vibe Jiu-Jitsu in Idaho Falls is where Adam goes.
Yeah.
So we went and hung out. We took like 3 or 4 classes. You know, they didn't charge us, just to make sure that that's where we wanted to be, because it's not cheap. It's not a cheap gym to go to.
No, nothing. Jiu-jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, it's totally worth it. Like, Jeremy and Brandon, the two guys that run the show there, they're both black belts. They're very proficient, and they're just way cool guys. Like, I'm pretty out of shape. I'm pretty terrible right now at the whole game. But man, there's no judgment. They're not even like little wisecracks. Like, they're totally professional. They're totally cool. And I tell you, all the other students there, they're all just solid and, super cool. Anyway, that's so I've been playing jiu-jitsu down there at Vibe. And then, so I usually try and get over there on a Thursday night. Saturday is just open mats. We just go around and roll around.
That's pretty cool.
So that's what I did Saturday. It's a lot of fun. Asked a lot of questions, like, you know, try to get some of the basic stuff down. And I knew Adam had a seminar that afternoon. It was full, 100% full.
No way.
So I knew I wasn't going to get into it. So I shot him a text, says, "Hey man, I hope you have a good class. I wish I could make it. I didn't get it in time." And he's like, "Oh, hey, I'm glad you texted me, because I just got off a phone with a guy from Helena that can't make it."
Oh, so you were able to sneak in there.
Yeah, he's like, just come on in. Don't worry about it. Just come hang out.
Nice.
I was like, oh, well, all right. So it went from like a 2 or 3 hour training day to like a 9 or 10 hour training day, and man, it was a lot of fun.
That's a long day, but yeah, it was definitely fun.
It was a long day, and Adam actually had some other, and I don't even know their names, and even if I did, they probably wouldn't want me sharing their names. But he had a couple other gentlemen with him. Well, one man in particular, older guy, you could tell he was old. At first, I kind of giggled because he was just kind of goofy. But it turns out this guy has lived in Thailand, and he's done all sorts of knife fighting, and he's gone all over the place. And he got in martial blade concepts like at the very beginning.
Okay.
And the two of Adam's helpers, Bob Boston, I can't remember the other guy's name. They're like, you know, that the older gentleman would come over and be like, "Hey, do this or do that." And it was a little different than what the curriculum was. And, you know, when Adam would walk around, he's like, "No, Steve, like, if he tells you to do it that way," he's like, "there is a reason." He says, "If you had any idea who this guy was, like, you would be amazed."
Really?
So I was like, okay, I'll listen to this guy too. Yeah, I don't even remember the guy's name. He said his name, but I mean, he does all sorts of collie stick fighting and like all sorts of stuff. So this guy whoever he was, it was an honor, because by the end of the training session at 6:00, I mean, I definitely had respect for the guy, because he absolutely knew what he was talking about, and he happened to hang out with me and my training partner more than anybody else out there. So,
oh really?
We must have been doing something right, I guess, or something wrong. Maybe we were doing something wrong, and he felt like he had to really hang out with us. Well, nonetheless, it was a long day Saturday.
Yeah,
but it was good.
Yeah, it sounds like a really fun day, and if Adam tells you to listen to somebody else, then you definitely want to heed that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm going to throw another plug out. Adam, with Vibe Jiu-Jitsu and Spartan Mode, Adam at the same gym every Monday night. If you're in the Idaho Falls area, he's going to be doing weekly, like, short seminars, little classes, and we're going to be doing like stuff from the mats, like practical, like how to get out of the holster, how to draw a knife in an attack, like actual in the heat of the moment, like, let's put the theory to the test and see if it works. It's going to be a lot of fun. Like
real deal stuff.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we're not using real guns and real knives, but we'll be in street clothes, carrying appendix with a training firearm, and, get in the heat of the moment, get jumped or whatever, and then see what happens trying to get the firearm out of appendix carry or 3:00 or 6:00 or whatever, it'll be kind of an eye-opening experience, I think.
Well, that's a good. I mean, that's good to know that there's still ways to train, no matter what, even despite the current situation.
Yeah, there absolutely are ways to train. If you're not training physically, at least train mentally and get some good books and something. Don't stop because COVID's here. Yeah,
and that's kind of what we're talking about too, a little bit. Not necessarily training, but I guess the practice of carrying and. Why you can carry probably more often than you think.
Yeah, and you should more than you think. So we're going to kind of go through some of the excuses and maybe we'll kind of bypass what we hear or what people say about, no, I don't want to carry today because of X or whatever. So let's see if we can bust some of these excuses.
Yeah, I've got a couple here. And the other thing too is I will say, and even though he's not here, Nick has brought up this point, which is a very good point multiple times, where sometimes you might just not be in the mindset to carry. You might not be,
right,
maybe in the mood, or you're more often maybe you're distracted or you're upset or something like that, or you just feel like it's not a great idea to carry that day. And you should definitely listen to your body and listen to your mind if that's the case. So I wanted to preface with that because, you shouldn't necessarily carry even if you're not like maybe in the right frame of mind, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I 100% agree with that. If you're not carrying a gun, let's just this way, carrying a gun is a huge responsibility. And if you're not willing to live up to that responsibility, then I respect that decision. And I hope that you don't have to, that's not the day that you have to need it.
Right.
But that goes to say, like, I mean, if you had to go to court and you were carrying a gun and maybe you were on extra pain meds or something that day, I mean, that could definitely play against you. So if you don't feel right, if you're on some kind of a medication or something that just isn't your day, then I respect that decision.
Yeah, same here. So, but you have to know yourself and all that. But sometimes I think people do have like excuses or objections to carrying where you might be overthinking it, or you might be a little more worried than you need to be. So I came up with a list of a couple different excuses or common maybe questions or like what if situations that people have. Figure we could just kind of go down the list and talk about them and see what you think.
Okay, let's do it.
So the first one is, and I think most everybody has this problem, at least when they start out, is that I don't want to carry because I'm afraid of printing and people are going to know that I am carrying a firearm.
Yeah. I've heard that a few times selling guns, behind the counter there.
Yeah.
And honestly, in all reality, the only one that really notices you printing is you. Unless it is like you're wearing a skin tight t-shirt or something, then sure. But most of the time it's, it's you. You're just like have this self-conscious thing that people are going to look at you and notice your gun right away. I know in the beginning I was always worried about it. And, sometimes I still am worried about it, but I just try to make sure that I wear the right apparel. And a lot of times it is the color of like your t-shirt that can make or break the difference too.
Yeah, that's true. Because
that sounds kind of weird, but it's true.
Well, and the other thing I've noticed is that, when you look at yourself in the mirror, you see yourself in a certain way. And if there's any little small difference, because you look at yourself, most of the time, at least once a day, and you kind of know how clothes fall and how clothes fit. And if you just notice one thing that might be different, you'll think everybody else will notice that as well. But if you think about it, when you go out to the mall or shopping or to a restaurant or whatever, and just or a grocery store and just people watch, and you'll notice how many people are actually on their phones.
Yeah.
If you're kind of having any modicum of situational awareness over your usual, over the average person anyway, you'll notice how many people are on their phones, not paying attention, not concerned with anything else other than the screen in front of their face. Yeah,
more so than ever. It really is actually kind of scary to me to think that all these people, we talk about Cooper color codes, back quite a few episodes ago.
Yeah.
In condition white all the time, completely oblivious. We talked about Adam's class. He added a new video. If you ever take any Adam's seminars, he has the first few minutes of his seminars are actual knife attacks.
Yeah.
And they are kind of gruesome, but there's a new one I hadn't seen. I've taken this class a few times, and of a gal, she's on her cell phone, facing a wall. It's kind of odd. She's facing this wall with her back to the crowd, which is, first of all,
strange,
a terrible idea.
Yeah.
But she didn't even notice. Like, this guy was less than 2 feet behind her for probably 30 seconds.
Wow.
And she was completely oblivious. And then the second she turned her around, he just throws a right hook and knocks her out.
Wow.
And yeah. So I guess that's a little bit extreme of what you're talking about as far as situational awareness and walking around. I know your idea was like, look at all the people that aren't paying attention to you.
Right.
And that's exactly the thing. People aren't going to notice unless you're doing something weird, like wanting to get printing, want to show off your print. Nobody's going to see it.
Right. And that's the point. Is
just kind of alter your clothes a little bit. It's good.
Yeah. And you can always wear, especially it's easier in the colder months as you get more into like wearing more layers, like a hoodie or a button down or a jacket or whatever. Cover garments really do make a big difference. And like I said, people aren't going to notice what's going on. They're not going to notice. They're not even going to notice you, let alone look at your belt line, whether you're carrying appendix or, strong side hip or whatever. You could probably, I've noticed it too, where people are open carrying and you don't notice it at first, even as a gun person, Well,
I went into the Boise Mall last time I was in town.
Yeah.
And this guy was walking through the mall, open carry.
Really?
And I don't know how many people noticed it. I noticed right as he got out of the car, we kind of parked at the same time. And,
sure.
And I was actually, first I was like, what the hell is this guy doing? And I was like, good on him.
Yeah.
Good on him for open carrying, because I wouldn't do it in the mall personally.
Well, and then that's another thing is that if people notice that you are carrying or whatever, it's usually either like law enforcement who will probably just kind of let you know that, hey, thanks for carrying. I've heard that does happen. Or other concealed carriers where they're probably not going to say anything anyway.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. So if you're scared of printing, let's see, what are some of the things we can do to overcome that fear? Because I'm sure that's a definite legitimate fear that people are feeling. I've heard it before.
Yeah. I would say start at places that you're comfortable at, where maybe go to the grocery store that you usually go to and walk around and do your grocery shopping and start out. Maybe if you are thinking about carrying, now is probably the better or perfect time to start, because you get to have kind of more layers and it looks less out of place as you go in and out of places. Or even I remember reading just start carrying with a holster without a gun in it first, just to get the feeling of a holster like on your person is a great way to start.
Yeah. And maybe you could even I guess you got to be careful because you don't want to be drinking involved, but you could go around with friends, and don't tell them that you're carrying. And
sure.
And then if somebody's mentioned something that, because those people know you, like they know how you dress, they know how you normally look, how you normally walk. So that might be a really good option, because they see you all the time or more frequently than just anybody in the mall.
Yeah. Or, kind of to take that another step is to go around with people who do carry all the time and just kind of go through the day with them. Maybe go to lunch, go run a couple errands, go to get, some coffee or something like that, and kind of see what they do, and maybe have them like walk behind you or in front of you and see if you're printing or whatever. You know what I mean? If you're really that worried about it, just kind of go through the motions of the day. And the more you do that, the more comfortable you'll be. And the more that you'll even notice that people aren't paying attention either,
Yeah. Cause I really do think a lot of the, we talked about just kind of self-criticism or whatever you want to call it. That's where the uncomfortability comes from, is it's something new to us. We've changed. I wouldn't say, I guess it is kind of a lifestyle change in a way. We've changed something very significant in our lives.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a step, and it's exciting in a way. Not like, oh, I'm super cool, I can do whatever I want, exciting, but I have control, a little bit more control of my own personal safety, exciting. Yeah.
It's a kind of, I guess, freeing in a way too. If you want to put it as opposed to exciting, it's a little more freeing. You're a little more self-reliant. But yeah, just the more you do it and the more you practice, the less that self or insecurity about printing happens. And, if somebody, let's take it a different way. What would you do, Steve, if you were carrying at a grocery store or something like that and somebody noticed and they weren't like a gun person, they were just like, hey, are you carrying a gun?
Well, I like to say or I like to think there's a couple of things I'd say. It would be like, yeah, because a cop's too heavy to carry around or something like that. Most of the time I just say, yep, and just keep walking or something like that.
Has that happened to you or no?
No, I mean, I've carried and had some looks before, but nobody's ever really noticed me, at least not that I'm aware of, that, oh yeah, you're carrying a gun.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know really exactly what I would say until I was in that situation. I'd probably just say, yep, and move on. I don't really want to engage in any sort of philosophical discussion. That's not something I'd really want to participate in, unless I can use it as some kind of a teaching moment, maybe.
Yeah.
I guess it really just depends on the situation when it happens.
But I mean, if you think about it, you've carried for quite a while and you've never run into that situation. So I think that shows that how remote that situation actually, the probability of that happening is, going to occur or not going to occur.
That I'm aware of. I've never had anybody really say anything to me.
Right. So that's a good thing. I think that's the people's number one most common fear or insecurity is that you're going to be printing and maybe you notice the one part of your shirt that's
wrinkled differently.
It's falling different. Yeah, exactly. But the other thing I would say is that, when you watch YouTube videos of people who are carrying, like I've noticed this on Warrior Poet Society or even T-Rex Arms or whatever, they're standing in front of the camera. It's like a waist high shot. So you have like most of their body in the frame. And at least for me, I'm looking at their face when they're talking like you would a normal, human person or rather a face-to-face interaction. And they're like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm
a human person,
right? A real human, live human being. But, then they're like, oh, by the way, I'm also appendix carrying this Glock 19 with a light on it and an extra mag and a red dot or whatever. And it's like, I didn't even notice. And so if that's happened to you while you're watching a YouTube video and you haven't even noticed when somebody draws their firearm out from an appendix style carry, you're probably not going to get noticed either. You know what I mean? Now, I will say that, you might want to change your movements a little bit to kind of make sure you don't accidentally remove that concealment. Like if you're going to bend down to pick something up that you have dropped, or maybe it's you're reaching for something on a high shelf or whatever, you've got to kind of think about those situations. Do you agree?
Right. Oh, absolutely. And that has happened to me before without anybody saying it. Like I remember going to Sportsman's Warehouse to get some shoes. That's when I used to carry at 6:00. and it's pretty hard to put on shoes without your t-shirt coming up in the back, or that the grip of the gun really angling out away from your body as you're tying a shoe. So I 100% know that's happened to me before. I remember feeling very uncomfortable actually from that experience. And I don't carry 6 o'clock anymore. I don't need anybody disarming me before I turn around. That's why I choose not to.
Right.
Maybe that's an unnecessary fear, but it's definitely a possibility. So I don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
But
Better
you're absolutely right, because you're right. If you're reaching up high, or you're bending one way or the other, that exposes maybe a strong side holster, that might freak somebody out. And people are weird lately. Like it might surprise somebody. So you need to carry or have garments or a jacket or something in a way that isn't going to flash that holster.
Yeah. So it's just something to keep in mind, but that's again, a different thing than printing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but that was my first biggest excuse that I've heard, or kind of insecurity about carrying, that you're going to print and everybody's going to know. People aren't paying attention that much. And once you kind of realize that, once you've carried a few times, you're going to become a lot more comfortable with it a lot faster.
Yeah. And like you said, and we talked about last week about wintertime carry, sweatshirts are awesome.
Hoodies are great.
That just adds a big fluffy layer. Now there's downside too, if you have to overcome that if you're coming from concealed. But as far as carrying that is a huge helper.
Yeah.
For the guy carrying. Even
just the comfort. Yeah. The comfort of carrying is a lot easier to handle. So, but speaking of like clothing and that kind of stuff, one of the things that you might have to think about is, what if you have to dress nicely?
And I do understand this struggle.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons that I put it up there. I thought that was relevant, is that, if you have to dress nicely, obviously things are usually a little more form fitting. You can't get away with wearing a hoodie. Maybe your dress pants are a little slimmer than your usual pair of jeans.
Yep.
So there's a lot of different things to consider. So what would you do in that kind of instance?
Well, so I like to wear a suit often. And I still try to carry appendix as much as I can. But what happens is, and maybe you can kind of visualize this in your mind's eye, is that holster's there. I got my dress belt and a dress shirt, and everything kind of pushes out there at the belt buckle. And for me, it's extremely obvious. Like, and maybe it's not to anybody else. We talk about printing, but you just got all these extra layers all coming into one spot, and it's kind of frustrating, and sometimes it's even uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I've tried. I think it was the 511 compression shirt that had the holsters under the armpits.
Oh yeah.
I didn't wear that for very long. It's actually stuck in a drawer because it doesn't cover my trigger, right? If I had to go in to reach for that firearm in a panic and I'm squeezing, I could easily take a round into the thoracic cavity, or maybe shoot somebody behind me or something, right. So that was kind of an unpleasant option after I really thought about it. So I haven't really found anything other than my regular Hoftac holster. I just kind of go off center of the body line just a little bit to try and change that whole belt buckle and everything coming into one spot there. Well, it's tough. There are some nice holsters out there, and maybe I just need to, kind of move to strong side carry, or heck, maybe even a shoulder holster, but I really don't like either of those options.
Yeah, the problem with the shoulder holster is, because that's, I think, where a lot of people go as their first kind of thought. Either from James Bond or, seeing detectives or something like that,
Miami Vice, buddy.
Miami Vice, exactly. But, you may have that problem where you're pointing it at somebody, and you also might not have the practice to be able to draw that way. And like you said, under the heat of and the stress of a situation, you may be running into some issues, and bigger issues than what you would normally be.
I guarantee if you're a new to the shoulder holster venue, you've probably swept your arm, you've muzzled people or at least potentially could muzzle somebody behind you. I mean, there's a lot to actually properly running a shoulder holster.
Yeah.
And it can get really complicated.
Definitely takes some extra training.
and I'd rather be shooting than having to worry about training on another holster platform.
Yep. So, but there are also, holster clips, not even necessarily just holsters, but holster clips that are tuckable, where you can have a tucked in dress shirt or whatever with them. But if you wear a suit jacket too, that's going to act like a cover garment as well, where you'll be able to carry maybe strong side towards the hip. And that's going to be a little bit easier than carrying appendix. So you may have to switch it up that way, but just depends on how you dress. And there's nothing wrong also with, going to a tailor if, it's somebody you trust and say, hey, I need maybe this specific pair of pants or this shirt kind of bloused out a little bit, or you buy, size too big for your dress pants and say, hey, I carry pretty often, because you think about people do it for the Secret Service and they do it for any kind of low key security. I mean, there's a huge application for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And they also make those things that cover the trigger guard that you can hook to your belt and put in your pocket. So if you're carrying something really small, like a Glock 42 or an LCP or something like that, that could be a really good option. Definitely has to cover the trigger guard.
That's
no matter what.
Yep, that's the big thing.
That's the most important. And those things really aren't my ideal option, but it is an option. The other thing might be ankle carry.
Yeah, that could be it too.
But I know for my suits, at least, my dress pants are different. But when I'm wearing suits, those pant legs kind of rise up a little bit more than normal dress pants.
Right.
So the option of flashing your primary, secondary down there in ankle carry is a lot higher.
Yeah, that's something to consider as well. But you can find ways to dress or carry from different kinds of dress, whether that's formal or casual or something in between, especially like work carry. Like a lot of people, maybe you are allowed to carry at work, but you have a certain dress code. Maybe you have to wear a button down shirt or, dress pants or something like that, you have to kind of maybe think about dressing around the gun if it's important enough to you to carry while you're at work.
Yeah. And we're looking at it a man's perspective. What
True.
about it if it's a woman in the office, if she's got to wear a dress or a skirt or something? I mean, you're in a whole different ballgame, and I'm no professional at ladies' clothing by any means.
Sure.
But, I mean, you can understand there's a whole different dynamic if she's wearing like a fancy fitted suit skirt or whatever, where you can't ankle carry. You're not going to be able to appendix carry. But there are options. What's that lady's? Deanne Adams? There's a lady out there that makes pretty good concealable undergarments for ladies that have a lot of options, whether it be like thigh carry or something that actually conceal really well. There's the flashbang, which is a kind of I don't know, that holster actually scares me. It's just a bra that carries a gun, on at chest height on the bra. To me, that seems like it could be dangerous. You could, if you're a gal and you get excited on accident and press that trigger on the way out, I mean, you could shoot yourself in the heart. That seems kind of scary, but
well, actually, I don't know if
it might be your only option. And go ahead.
I was say, I don't know if you heard about it, but there was a woman in town here who she called the cops. She was running in the park at like 5:00 in the morning, and she called the cops because she got shot, right? At least that's what she said. And she said she didn't hear it, didn't see where it was coming from. The story that kind of came out a couple weeks later was that after the detectives kind of pressed her on her story not adding up, apparently she had a negligent discharge and shot herself in the stomach.
Oh, jeez.
So I don't know what the full story was, but once I heard about that, the gears immediately started turning. Like, okay, so obviously she was either concealed carry or open carrying. If she was going for like a morning run or something like that, maybe she had a belly band, or maybe she did have one of those flashbang style holsters or whatever. And like thinking about how you can ND into your own stomach, so And it made me think like, man, there's a lot of unsafe ways to carry
crazy
out there.
Yeah, that's super crazy. And that, I mean, there's options out there for like jogging and stuff, but as you can see, that stuff can fail. I mean,
Sure can.
That's or she maybe altered it, or it was using it in a way that wasn't recommended by the manufacturer. So
yeah, they really didn't tell like the full story, but I remember reading about that and immediately thought like, okay, there's some sort of, you know, less than ideal gun handling going on here that resulted in, you know, shooting yourself in the stomach, which is not great.
Oh man.
So
that's, well, it could have ended obviously way worse for her too.
Yeah.
She's still pretty lucky, but hopefully that taught her a lesson.
Yeah, for sure.
Get training. My heavens, get training.
Yeah. But so, I mean, you think about sometimes those belly bands or those flashbangs are, you know, options and stuff, but you got to kind of maybe balance your convenience, or like how you want to carry with how safe it is. You know, you want to make sure you keep that in mind.
Yeah, and using it for the intended purpose, right?
Also,
so maybe that belly band was a good option for, you know, not running. But when you run, it's just not, there's not the proper retention for that kind of movement.
Right.
And the gun just slipped out. I mean, you got to use it as, you know, prescribed.
Exactly. So, but yeah, so just being able to figure out how to carry for different kinds of dress, whether that's formal, casual, activewear, anything like that. There are products around there that are made in ways to carry that you can make that happen. So another one that I had was driving for a long period, or maybe you're in the car more often than not, and maybe not carrying in that regard. What do you think of that?
So I'm kind of torn because I drive a lot too, right? Like
Sure.
I'm back and forth to Boise often.
Yeah.
There's kind of two methods of thought, right? So in reality, I probably shouldn't disarm, right? I probably should find a carry option that allows me to drive in comfort. But
Sure.
That's harder and harder too. You know, I mean, you can't go strong side because that interferes with the seat belt. Appendix works okay, but then it's uncomfortable. So what do you do? I mean, I guess you could take your gun out, and you know, Mark was talking about, or Nick was talking about it last week, I think, about those magnets you can attach to the dashboard.
Sure.
But I think if you get in a car accident or something, stuff's flying around all over the place, then you've lost a gun, and that's not good.
Yeah, it's a bad idea.
So it's tough. It's kind of a tough thing to think about, and maybe that is where the ankle option comes in, the ankle holster option, because
could be, yeah,
it's not going to really be bugging you on if you're right-handed and it's on your left ankle. You know, it's not going to be bugging you too much.
Yeah, I mean, even otherwise, if it's on your left ankle and you're left-handed, that also works too. I think it depends on how long you are driving for. Like, you know, if you're just commuting to work and maybe it's 15-20 minutes, that's not the worst thing. You know, but if you're driving 4 or 5 hours, maybe figuring out another way to carry is a good idea, you know?
And I have driven, you know, the 4.5 hours between here and Boise, without taking my gun out. Some of it's if I've eaten a lot too the day before or something, and my waistline changes just a fraction of an inch, or, I mean, that can make the difference too.
That's true. You'll feel the difference.
Yeah. Or maybe you need to adjust the seating position. You know, maybe you need to lean back that backrest just a little bit to open up that angle for you. Yeah.
And, but appendix carry definitely can work, while you're driving too, although, you know, for a long time, it may get a little uncomfortable, but.
Yeah. If you're driving, like you say, 20, 30 minutes, maybe even up to an hour, hopefully it's not irritating you that much. And maybe you need to change the holster. I mean, the holster might be the problem.
Right.
Maybe it's riding too high or riding too low.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I was actually going to bring up. That's another one too. And in addition to driving, is just that it's uncomfortable from the get-go, you know? And I think one of the things you think about that is if it's uncomfortable, well, carrying a gun isn't comfortable no matter what.
Yeah. And I don't think it should be comfortable.
Yeah, it should be. I mean, you should be reminded. No, I mean, I think you should be reminded that it's there and that, you know, you have that responsibility. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think you should never really forget that you have it on, because the people that I see, well, I shouldn't say that, kind of sounds mean, but a lot of the times I see people that do carry it for a living and they forget it's there, and then they forget how to respect it.
Yeah, it gets into the complacency aspect of things.
Yeah. And you get complacent in every activity. I mean, I see cabinet shop workers, they get complacent around the power tools, around the table saw. I see, you get complacent anywhere. You get complacent in your car driving to and from places.
Yeah, for sure.
All of us are absolutely guilty of that. And so I think in a way, it should be a little uncomfortable, like you say, to remind you of that responsibility of what you're carrying.
Yeah. And I mean, you do get used to it, but
yeah. And that probably is the number one complaint, is it's uncomfortable to carry. And so they just stop carrying.
Well, so I will say that
I would say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that, so if it's uncomfortable, maybe you have the wrong holster. I'm willing to bet that you actually more commonly have the wrong belt, or not a strong enough belt to carry what you're trying to carry. And if you change out your belt for a good quality dedicated gun belt and a good quality holster, it's going to carry a lot more comfortably, distribute that weight a lot more comfortably. It's going to be way, way, way more comfortable. Yeah.
And I would say that the gun belt or your carry belt is probably the most important thing to comfortability. And you won't understand it until you actually have a good gun belt, until you've gone from the Walmart $10.99 special to a good gun belt. And they're expensive. Like, a good belt is not cheap, but there's a reason why they're not cheap.
Yep.
And maybe when you say gun belt, some of the new carriers are thinking, I don't want to have one of those fancy nylon things with those stupid Cobra buckles. And I mean, I have to dress nice. Well, there are some extremely nice handcrafted leather belts that are rigid and will change the way you carry forever.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't need to necessarily look like it's, a tactical belt and that sticks out all the time. You know what I mean? You can actually have one that looks like it's a good old fashioned leather belt, but it really is built and reinforced and has, the hardware and maybe some plastic or some kind of rigid polymer in the middle that'll help keep that gun up and distribute the weight. But it really does make a night and day difference, especially if you don't have a regular, carry gun belt. And to your point too, that, finding out the most comfortable ways to carry for you, both, in terms of, comfort and printing and all that kind of stuff, does come down to belt and holster selection. And it's not a cheap endeavor. You have to spend some time and spend some money to try out different holsters and different belt combinations and, to find really what works for you. That's why there's so many different kinds on the market. Same thing with firearms, where there's so many different kinds of firearms on the market, because it's such a personal choice that you really have to, figure out what works for you. And you might have to spend a little money and time to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I say they're not inexpensive.
Right.
So, but they're not terribly expensive either. So my nephew carries a lot, but he has to dress nicely for work.
Right.
And so he chose, I'm going to just throw another shameless plug out there. He went to Hank's Gun Belt, and I just pulled up their website.
Yeah.
And I mean, they have belts for every fashion. And they're nice looking gun belts. And maybe it's kind of confusing. So what's like the difference between just a leather belt from like maybe a Western store or something to a gun belt? Well, most gun belts are reinforced with maybe a strip of steel or some kind of Kydex or something in between the two laminations of leather that keep it rigid. I don't know if you've had a leather belt for a long time, you kind of know how it starts to shape and kind of sag in certain places, and it's, I guess, broke in in a way.
Yeah.
Well, these belts don't do that. They stay rigid. They stay where they're supposed to go. So it holds that holster in the most comfortable place possible. It's not going to be sagging on your hip if you carry, 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock or whatever, if you're right or left-handed. It's not going to sag and pinch into your hip. It's not going to sag and pinch where you don't want to pinch an appendix carry. It's going to stay where it's supposed to stay. These belts, they start, looks like about $60 or so, and they go on up. And I know that can be expensive, but everything's expensive. I mean,
yeah,
a good holster and a good belt need to be expensive.
Well, and it's also probably the last one you need to buy for a while. You know what I mean?
Oh, they last forever.
Yeah.
They're handcrafted. I mean, they're good belts. They'll last forever.
Yeah. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Hanks is a great place. I have a belt from them, believe it or not, and it's worked pretty well. And like a good kind of, if you're at a gun store and you're looking at different belts and stuff, one kind of good litmus test for that is to, not put it on you, but like kind of, put it like you were, but like just kind of hold it up in the air. And if it holds its shape in the air, you've got a pretty good one. It shouldn't sag like Steve said, or kind of bend down. It should hold its shape kind of however you hold it in the air. That's kind of a good barometer to test if it's a good gun belt or not.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds silly. It doesn't sound like it makes any sense, but once you make that transition, you'll say, man, I should have done this sooner.
Yeah, exactly. And it'll make
it's a difference.
It'll make your carrying a lot more comfortable. So, another one I thought of, was that I have, a significant other who is against me carrying.
I've actually heard that before too. Yeah.
Have you?
Oh, yeah, it's kind of a tough one. I've talked to guys, buying guns in the stores, and then they're like, well, my wife, she's pretty anti-gun, or she doesn't want me buying anything, but they buy it anyways, and we can't control the dynamic at home. I mean, once that guy's made that decision, husband or wife, whoever is the pro gun in that relationship, I mean, it's up to them to figure out how to get it home and complete the sale at home.
That's your gunfight, not ours.
Yeah. And hopefully not literally, but it very well could be. It's tough. Like, I mean, I've never had to worry about that. You've talked to my wife, she's not anti-gun by any means.
Not at all.
But she's not super like pro gun either. Like, she's not crazy 2A like I am.
Sure.
Yeah, that is kind of tough. My recommendation would to respect their wishes as much as you can, but I'd probably still carry. Honestly, I'm so stubborn, I'd carry anyways, even if my wife didn't like it.
Well, and one of the things that you could, I mean, maybe do if you feel comfortable enough to make it happen is, I don't know. If they were like kind of ambivalent about it and they're not sure, if they're maybe not fervently against it, like maybe try to carry when you go out with them for the day or whatever and see if they notice. And then at the end of the day, be like, hey, by the way, I was carrying like all day.
Yeah. I mean, you might have to sleep on the couch or something, but
might help you prove your point.
Who did I talk to? I talked to somebody, or we heard a story somewhere where she was the spouse, the wife in the relationship. She was anti-gun, like vehemently anti-gun. But they lived in like Portland or somewhere like that. And all of a sudden, like, that relationship changed, right? She's like, we need to get a gun in the house.
Really? Yeah.
I'm worried for our safety. So the times that we live in right now with the riots or peaceful protests or whatever you want to call it, and COVID and people being cooped up, I mean, it's kind of a crazy time, and maybe it's an opportunity to get that less comfortable spouse into some classes.
Yeah.
To open them up a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. It just depends on, what the situation is, kind of,
Yeah. I mean, I've sold guns to women who've had their homes broken into, and they would never have done that stuff before, but they were super scared about, once your vulnerabilities have been exposed and you have no way to defend yourself, you tend to swing the pendulum too far.
Sure.
I've talked with these women before. I've worked with them before in the range with one-on-ones. But you don't want to get to that point, right? Hopefully you want to war game that scenario before it ever gets to that point, and you're already prepared.
Yeah, you should be having the conversation already before actually bringing home a gun and a holster and say, well, I'm going to start carrying,
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that there could be some really terrible consequences of bringing a firearm home to a spouse that's anti-gun or a significant other that is not for guns. I mean, that could end up pretty bad. I mean, it could end a relationship. In all honesty, some people are that passionate about it. So that is completely up to you to decide on how to fight that dynamic.
Yeah. So I would say make sure you have that conversation first before anything else.
Yeah. You need to prime the pump, so to speak, to make sure that you're at least breaking down some of those barriers, because it might not be a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think that's all I had actually for kind of your common excuses or to not carry or objections to not carry. But to kind of circle back to the beginning, there are times where you either shouldn't carry or not carrying is the right decision. And the first thing I can think of that we haven't talked about yet is if it's illegal to carry in certain buildings in your state or your municipality.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up for sure.
Yeah. Well, why don't you take us there?
Yeah, I was hoping we'd touch on that. So in Idaho, right? I mean, I'm not an attorney. Mark's not an attorney. This is definitely not legal advice. You have to seek out the local laws in your city and state, because those can vary from city to city within a state.
Very much so.
Now, hospitals, schools, any kind of federal building, you're prohibited from carrying a firearm, concealed or exposed. It doesn't matter. You are prohibited from carrying a firearm, or honestly, a weapon for that matter. Even a pocket knife could be construed as a weapon, right?
Right. So
you need to understand those laws. Now, private property is a different story. We talked about the mall, maybe certain stores. Every store has the right and honestly the privilege to post no firearm signs on their buildings. And it's up to you if you want to patronize those places or not. I mean, a private business has that right, whether we like it or not. In my opinion, and I know Mark kind of feels the same way, concealed is concealed. Yeah. Right. So if they don't know, then they don't know. Now, what's the worst that could happen, right? Are we going to get arrested if somebody finds out we're carrying? We use the mall as an example because that's probably one of the most common places people are going to anyways, right? So if you go into the mall and the mall security sees your gun, are you going to get arrested? No, probably not.
You'll be asked to leave.
You'll be asked to leave. Now, if you want to push the issue, they'll proceed with maybe a trespass or something. If you push the issue farther, you'll probably go to jail for doing something stupid. But if they ask you to leave, then just leave. You don't have to be there. Right? There's no need to go there. Like if it's your favorite Mexican restaurant and they find out that you're carrying a gun and they don't like it and they kick you out, well, that's your bad. Yeah.
You decided to kind of take that chance. Yeah.
Yeah. You should have either carried differently or not carried that day or something. Right. We talked about taking knife classes from Adam. Maybe you need to put some different tools in the toolbox. Right. To have some other safety options. So,
well, and the other thing too, is that you could also, think that you just made an honest mistake and that, that happens and that you can learn from that experience. But I think, maybe the point that you're getting at is that you have to kind of weigh your options where, there's a difference between a private property sign that says maybe, don't carry, or maybe it's against your work policy to not carry or whatever. And that maybe that choice is up to you. But you're trying to carry in like a federal building or a hospital or someplace like that, you're gonna face a little bit stiffer consequences, and we don't recommend doing that.
No, if you enjoy carrying your gun and expressing your Second Amendment rights, then you should not carry in any kind of a federal building or malls or airports.
Right.
Don't do that. I know a guy that got he was actually a rep that accidentally left one of his guns in his carry-ons from repping a show.
Oh, geez.
That was a long day for him.
Yeah.
They ended up, they worked things out, but
still,
it was a very, very uncomfortable few hours in a small room with people in the airport that are probably not pleasant to talk to.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're not assuming the best for that matter.
No.
So
don't do it. Yeah. Understand the laws. Part of our response, it is a responsibility for us as concealed carry holders to understand and obey the law. Not an option. It is our responsibility.
Yeah.
And ignorance will not get us out of any problems.
No, it sure won't. It's still going to give you a headache at the very least. So, and that's the thing, even if you are in the gun world, maybe you're, in the gun industry and you get complacent a little bit, and that one time can get you into trouble, Yeah.
And it's not worth it. Like, it's not worth the hassle. Like I say, if you're in a private place of business and they ask you to leave, don't, be a good steward. We talk about being good stewards of the Second Amendment. Be respectful. It's their business. It's their property.
Right.
And maybe you just leave without a problem, and maybe they'll let you back in. If you're going to cause a problem, we see stories at those big box stores where the guy causes a problem and the cops show up and then he's banned for life. I understand making a statement, and I definitely understand defending the Second Amendment, but sometimes there's better avenues of defending that right.
Yeah, you kind of ask yourself, is this a battle you really want to fight at this time in your day or your life or whatever? But to that degree too, that you may want to have kind of a way to safely store that firearm in your car, because like you said, it could be that maybe you're at your favorite restaurant and they come up to you and say, hey, I don't know if you know this, but we actually have a no firearms policy, blah, blah, blah. And you could say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know, or I didn't see, or it was my mistake, I didn't even think about it. And then you can go store that in your vehicle and kind of go about your day without any hassle. You know what I mean? Rather than making a scene or getting kicked out or, having some kind of issue. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And there are some really good options out there. Was it Cryptech? No, what's the
Vault Tech?
That's a design. Vault Tech. That's the one.
Yeah.
Some of those vaults you can install them in your trunk of your car, like bolt them to the metal in the trunk of your car. That's a pretty good option.
Right. Making it very difficult to get for somebody that's an unauthorized user to get that out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So there's ways. I wouldn't just chuck it under the seat. That's kind of stupid. I guess I'm guilty of it. Don't put stickers all over your car that say Glock fanatic and come and take it and that kind of stuff.
Right. You're kind of inviting some issues there.
Like I say, I guess I'm kind of guilty of that. In some of my previous vehicles, I've decorated it probably too obviously, but I'd never left my firearm in my vehicle.
Sure.
That way I did not leave it in there, because that's just poor planning.
Yeah. Especially unsecured.
Yeah.
Because
and who's responsible if it gets stolen? You think the thief's going to go do a 4473 on that firearm and take possession of the gun? No.
Yeah, I don't think so.
No.
So something to keep in mind. Yeah, I think that about wraps it up for me. Are there any other issues or objections or excuses that you've heard in your time that people have said to not carry?
No, I think we pretty much hit on the major ones. Like whether they have to change their clothing type, or like I said, printing was what the first thing we talked about, and probably the majority was it's so uncomfortable. And,
right.
And I think we pretty much hit all those.
Yeah, I think we did too. So we did good today.
Yeah.
Well, we'll close it out then for now. Maybe if we missed one, or maybe you have a an objection or an excuse to carrying or an insecurity about carrying that you'd like to address, let us know. podcast@iishooting.com. Or you can message us at Facebook or Instagram at Range Minded Podcast and let us know if we missed one, or if you want to send us a message about anything. We take it all. So,
heck yeah, even the stuff that you don't like, or just tell us.
Or you know what? Maybe if you email us a question that you think is too stupid to ask, or maybe you're too embarrassed to ask somebody else, we can address it and answer it for you.
Yeah. And even if you want to keep it anonymous, we'll keep it anonymous.
Yeah, for sure. So, well, we'll close that one down.
I'm a stupid guy. I can make stupid answers up. So.
And we both have had dumb questions about things, so we're always learning.
That's right.
So thank you for listening. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, guys. Be safe.
Thanks. Thanks for listening to Range Minded. Find us online at Range Minded Podcast on Facebook, or send us an email at podcast@iishooting.com. We're always happy to get feedback, episode suggestions, whatever you want to send us, really. And be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and pretty much wherever else you get your podcasts from. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.